Hello and welcome back to Dr. Neurosaurus. Today's Paleo Spotlight is Dr. Sara ElShafie. Sara is a traditionally trained paleontologist who used her interests in climate change and science communication to pivot her career into training scientists to showcase their work effectively and environmental philanthropy. She shares lots of advice for young paleo-interested people, so let's dig in. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what you do?
What I do currently, I work in environmental philanthropy with a nonprofit think tank. And in addition to that, I also do science communication training. The communication training, I've been doing that for a number of years as an entrepreneur, as an independent contractor in various capacities. I also worked for a communications firm for a bit. And my training is in paleontology. So my degree is in integrative biology. My PhD, I also did a master's in earth and atmospheric sciences. So I'm kind of broadly trained as a biologist, a geologist, and a climate scientist.
How did you get from, sort of traditional paleo training to the SciComm world and environmental philanthropy and the things you do now?
To make a long story short, I got into paleo because I was always just interested in science in general, especially biology, and then also the geology, and paleo is the combination of the two. Plus, I always really like working with my hands. And the awesome thing about paleo is that you get to play with bones and fossils all the time. And so it's like the best kind of evidence for me to work with. How did I get into SciComm from that? Well, paleo, I had always really enjoyed talking about science with people even before I got into paleontology specifically. But I think paleo sort of motivated my interest in sharing science with people even more, because even though a lot of people are already just interested in fossils because they're so inherently cool. I mean, who doesn't like fossils and doesn't think that extinct animals are awesome? But aside from like an inherent cool factor, paleontology is still very much removed from most people's everyday lives. And so it really mattered to me to try to find links between what we can learn from the fossil record and the things that people care about in their day-to-day. So I think trying to find those connections and figure out how to put paleontology in a more immediate, relevant framework for people, that motivated my interest in science communication. So I got really into science communication while I was in my PhD program, because I realized that I was struggling to explain my science to my own family. And that really bothered me because I thought, well, if I can't make this matter to the people who already care about me most, and not just like politely matter, I mean, like they can really see why this is important, then what is the point of any of this? And why would anybody else care? So I really decided to work at it. And that what started as an effort to improve my own skills then became a kind of passion project, because I realized a lot of other people, many of my peers and colleagues, were trying to do the same thing. So I started putting together seminars to help them out. All of us help each other. And those seminars turned into workshops. And those workshops became a side gig. And that side gig became a side career. Then it became my full-time career for a while. So that's how I got into the communication stuff. And then how did I get into environmental philanthropy? I've always been interested in climate change and conservation and sustainability and environment since I was a little kid, actually. And my interest in paleontology, I would say, has always been connected to that, because I wanted a bigger context for understanding what's happening to the world now. I was interested in not just communicating science with people, but also figuring out how to bring the communication together with helping with immediate action, like policy, like getting the funding where it needs to go to actually be able to help address the most immediate pressing issues resulting from climate change. Now I've stepped into this role as environmental philanthropy. My sort of internal title is the global climate specialist, which I love because it allows me to be so broad and to really draw on every aspect of my training and my interests. So I can bring my scientific training, my communications training and experience, and just my interest in this area to help direct philanthropic funding to the causes that need it the most.
What an incredible trajectory. It's so it's so interesting to see how people apply their paleo training to non-paleo jobs, because it's also different and there's so many things you can do with paleo training that people might not even consider. So it's fascinating to hear your specific trajectory and what you've accomplished and where you are now.
I couldn't agree more that there's so many things you can do with paleo training. And I'm so happy that you have an entire show dedicated to highlighting some of the various pathways that you can take with paleo training and even just paleo interest. Yeah, 100%. I think becoming a paleontologist is just one of many things that you can do with training in paleontology. And it's a great career trajectory if that's what you want to do. But there's also a million other things that you can do with it, because the awesome thing about paleo is that paleontology combines so many different scientific fields. I mentioned biology and geology, but also the ecology and climatology and chemistry and physics and like pretty much you name it, paleo kind of overlaps with it in some capacity, because paleo is really it's all about reconstructing lost worlds and animals that don't exist anymore. And to be able to do that, you kind of need a little bit of every branch of science, which is awesome. And you also get to be a detective, and it requires a lot of imagination as well, because you have to imagine the worlds that don't exist anymore and the animals that aren't around anymore based on just their bones or bits of their bones. And then it also requires artwork, because you need to bring that world to life and these animals to life in a way that other people can really appreciate and understand. You kind of become a generalist in that you'll more or less specialize in maybe one or a few areas, but you also get at least a working knowledge or some exposure to tons of other stuff. And that trains you really well to be able to learn anything as needed moving forward. So I think paleontologists can become lawyers, they could become farmers, they can become consultants, they can become politicians, they can become nonprofit philanthropists, they can become anything. So if everybody studied only one type of science, I think everyone should study paleontology, because it prepares you to do whatever you might do afterwards.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because that's what I hear about a law degree. It's like if you get a degree in law or business, you can do anything, and it's amazing to hear it in the context of paleo.
So, I
It's
mean, that's also totally true. With a degree in, you can translate that to a ton of stuff. Same with business. Yeah, I mean, I think training in one thing should never limit you to only doing that one thing. It's just a skill set that you enter the world with, and it's a frame of reference that you have. But then the more broadly you can apply that training and that perspective, the more innovative you'll be able to be in any one thing that you apply yourself to.
And it's so important, because the traditional paleo jobs of, being a professor, being a curator, being, something in a museum, there's so few of those. And so as you say, the ability to translate that skill set into any number of other tangentially related or even like out of left field professions is really important.
I think it's really smart for anybody who might already be studying paleontology, if you're a grad student, for example, or a postdoc, and you're preparing to enter the job market soon. It's like definitely go for whatever you're most interested in doing, but have some backup plans, and just recognize that if any one thing doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. It's totally fine. In fact, you might find other opportunities that you weren't even aware of or hadn't thought about initially, but that you might enjoy just as much, or who knows, might be even better fit for you based on your interests and priorities. So having lots of options and casting a wide net is really smart, no matter what field you're coming from, paleontology included. Don't feel like you need to just do one thing. I think the best thing you can do is be prepared to try lots of things, or like apply yourself, with absolute commitment to whatever you're doing then. But then if it's not working or it doesn't work out, don't be afraid to pivot to something else. And that's very, very normal.
I think that's great advice. What kinds of advice do you have, not for people that are already sort of embedded in the paleo research world, but for the younger crowds that are interested in becoming a paleontologist.
If you're interested in paleontology and you're just getting started, oh man, you have so much great stuff ahead of you. And I'm excited for you. And I would encourage you to absolutely pursue it and just enjoy every aspect of it and every minute of it. I already talked about the benefits of taking paleontology training out into the broader world, so I won't belabor that again, but if you're just entering paleontology, I would say dinosaurs are awesome and they're a fantastic entry point. I mean, it's like mythological creatures, except they actually existed, what could be cooler? But there's also this whole world of other creatures that existed in the past that are no longer around, or even that their descendants are still around, but they were also around in the past. And that by itself is fascinating, that like a croc pretty much still looks like a croc, even though there were like even weirder crocs. And by crocs, I mean crocodiles and like their relatives in the past. So there's so much to explore in the world of Earth history. And I would say go crazy, like learn about all of it. So don't limit yourself. I think, if there's one thing to keep in mind, I would say don't limit yourself. Learn about the plants too. Learn about how the landscapes changed. Learn about the stuff that was in the ocean, which dinosaurs were not. So learn about all of it, because the more you learn, the more fascinating it is. And it's so much fun. And also, whether you end up gravitating towards doing collections work or doing field work or some combination of both, I would absolutely encourage you to try out a bit of both, because both are fantastic experiences. And I think no paleontology experience is complete without at least dabbling a little bit in both. And it just enriches your perspective and your training to do a little bit of both, at least a bit of both. Yeah. And then for people who are already studying paleontology and are preparing to go out into the world, I will add just one thing. As you're, thinking about how you can take your paleontological training and kind of scientific training broadly and apply that to all different kinds of things, whether you become a career paleontologist or an academic scientist or something else, never feel like you have to define yourself just by your study subject.
And even if you do come up with a title for yourself, it's okay to change it. It's okay to change it as your interests change.
Yeah.
You can adapt as creatures adapt to their environment. So do we in our fields.
Absolutely.
As someone who has watched your trajectory over the years and all of the cool things you do, it's just so uplifting and so heartwarming that not only your own path and how you've developed these interests and followed these passions to where they've led you, but also that you're so selfless in sharing that information and trying to lift everybody up. I think that's incredible. And I appreciate that about you.
Oh, well, thank you, Ahenya. That's very kind. And I would say exactly the same about you. We've been following each other's trajectories for a while now and even collaborated on some projects. And that's been so enjoyable. And it's been so awesome and inspiring to see how you've taken your own training and interests and passions and merged those in all kinds of exciting ways over the years. So right back at you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I will link to your Science Through Story page and your research work so that people can check those out and contact you for further information there. We'll see you in the next video.